All right, hello everyone. We're going to go through chapter 1. It's called A View of Life, and this is for AP Biology. Now, this recording and this PowerPoint is going to be based on the old textbook that we're using. We're getting new ones this year, but basically all the information is going to be the same. But this is just going to be the kind of overview of me talking you through the chapter. One thing you might notice when we're going through the chapter is we have the chapter divided into different sections. Let me show you what that looks like here. So 1.1, what we would go over in 1.1 would be like the first day. Then 1.2 would be the second day. 1.3 would be the third day. So if you miss a day, if you miss you're absent for whatever reason, if it says on the calendar or my Google Classroom what we're doing that day, we're going over 10.2. You can go back into my notes, my videos, say, hey, where is 10.2? That's what I missed for that day. So I separate each chapter into these sections, and this is just how I kind of divide the chapter up. It somewhat goes along with your book. It's not perfect. I definitely kind of combine sections because I don't like how they have it ordered. But but let's start out with 1.1. Biology. If you're in biology, you should know what it is. It's the study of life. The cell is the most basic form or unit of life. That's where all life starts from. Is just cells. So that's what biology is, and we're going to be studying it all year. It's kind of if you break down the words, I don't think I have it up here. No, if you break down the word here, bio meaning life and ology meaning the study of. Oh, let me go back. So we have this biological organization, and we're going to be looking at this organization throughout the whole year. Basically, what this means is we're going to start here at the atom. Atoms are not living, but we still start there to talk about the different properties of atoms and then how they combine to molecules and compounds. Now, again, these are not living structures. They are too small to be living. It jumps to cells here. I like to add in macromolecules here and apart from macromolecules, organelles. But then it jumps to cells. So if you're noticing, we're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So obviously, compounds and molecules are made of atoms. Cells are made of molecules. So each one we're getting bigger and bigger. Then we go to tissues, organs, organ systems, like your digestive system, the organism, population, that's just one type of organism. And then community is a bunch of different types or species of organisms. And then ecosystem, we add in the abiotic factors. And then we have our biosphere. I also like to add in here biomes, but we don't really go that deep into ecology. But this is how life in general on Earth is organized. All right, two main types of cells. We have eukaryotic and prokaryotic. You should know these terms on the first day of class. There's a lot to learn about them, but I would know the basics. The basics are eukaryotic cells, they have a nucleus. Prokaryotic cells, they don't have a nucleus. One thing you're going to also notice is eukaryotic cells are much bigger and they're much more complex, while prokaryotic cells are very small and they're kind of simple. Qualities shared by all cells. All cells have to be enclosed by a membrane. That's the cell membrane or the plasma membrane. And then all cells must have some type of genetic code. Usually, most of the time, 99.99% of the time, DNA is that cell's genetic code. All right, let me go back. Two terms you should also know, unicellular and multicellular. Unicellular, my tip or my piece of advice for students is start looking at words and how to break them down. So uni meaning one, cellular meaning cells. Organism made of only one cell. Multicellular, multi meaning many, cellular made of more than one cell. That's what we're talking about there. All right, biology can be classified into three domains. We come back to these three domains at the end of the year when we talk about ecology, but basically these domains are bacteria, archaea, and eukarya. Bacteria and archaea are prokaryotes. Bacteria, obviously, just like common bacteria. Archaea is like a kind of an older type of bacteria, and it's prokaryotic, so we'd think it's very closely related to bacteria, which it kind of is, but it's actually more related to eukarya. If you look here, it's actually more related to eukarya than bacteria. And it wouldn't make sense to you because these look so much more similar than these, but it's actually more related to eukarya. But eukarya is us, plants, animals, fungi, and protists. So you can see as we're going on here, like 1.1, we're still on the first day, quote unquote, of notes, but this is just the first section, the first day of notes. 6 characteristics of life. You went over this when you went into your 9th and 10th grade biology classes. There are different types of or different characteristics of life that different textbooks use. I've seen up to 7 or 8. I've seen as low as 5. We go around 6 and say, hey, there's 6 characteristics of life, and just, what are they? Acquire materials and energy, maintain homeostasis, respond to stimuli, have adaptations and evolve, reproduce and develop, has genetic code, contain cells. Focus on those. I wouldn't, there are others like you sometimes they separate, maintain homeostasis and respond to stimuli. There are others. Let's just focus on those for this class. All right, so we're going to get our first definition of evolution because this is the central theme of biology. This is my favorite chapter. I love talking and just explaining evolution. It's just a really cool section. But I read this quote back when I was in high school and college, and it says, "Nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution." And I didn't really like connect with that until I started teaching biology, and I was like, "Wow, yeah, like this is all just tied into evolution." So the definition I start you out with is change over time. So understand that's what we're going to start at, but we're going to get to a much better definition as the year progresses. But I try to tie in evolution to every single chapter. All right, so this would be where the first day of notes ends. This is 1.1. That's kind of just like an overbrief of biology. This is now what we're going to go into 1.2, which is like science. How is science performed? Some terminology that you're going to need to know. But this is would be the quote unquote second day of notes. All right, so 1.2 is based on science, and the word hypothesis we should already know. It's an educated guess. Um, like anything in life, when you dive deeper into it, it gets more complex, and there's a lot more to it. So let's go over that. What I'm trying to explain here is, as we go through these words that you might already know, we're going to be adding to them. You're going to be learning their complexities a little bit different. There's more to just those definitions. So a couple of things I like to talk about with hypotheses is it must be consistent with what's already known. It's capable of being tested and possibly falsifiable or falsified by evidence. What that basically means is it has to be disprovable. Like you have to be able to disprove a hypothesis for it to be a good working scientific hypothesis. If you can't disprove it or if you can't test it, it's not really a good hypothesis or a scientific hypothesis. It needs to be disprovable. The bell will ring at the end of the period. We can test that. We can obviously test that. That's a working. That's a decent hypothesis. Two different types of hypotheses are null and alternative. We'll dive more deeply into these in the first week of school when we go over statistics, but basically null hypothesis states that there is no significant difference between the expected and observed data. An alternative hypothesis is the hypothesis that the researcher is trying to test and see if this is what is I don't want to say what's true, but what is true. The examples that I have here, the Earth is flat and the Earth is round. You're trying to disprove one and not prove the other, but support it with evidence. And these are not great examples in the sense of what we'd be doing in class, but I'm trying to get you to understand what the difference between null and alternative hypothesis is. Now, going through here, the controlled experiment, this is a variable is unchanged, and the baseline that lets us see if the treatment has an effect. So basically in a controlled experiment, you have a control group and then you have your test group. So like your control group doesn't have any variables changed, and then that one test group is the group where you're going to have one variable change and you're going to be testing it. So we have something to base it off of. We have a group to compare it to. We don't just test something, we have to have a control group to compare it to. All right, facts. Go back. Facts. These are observations that can be repeatedly confirmed. The bell rang in last period. We can go back to the audio. We can go back to video. We can see that the bell rang last period. I don't like using the word prove when we're going through with this with science and science education, because we don't prove things in science. We support them with evidence. So we can support that there was a bell that rang at the end of the period, last period. So these are facts. Positive and negative control groups, these are a couple different types of ways that we test things in science. A positive control group is an experiment with definite results from the variable. Confirms that the system is working correctly. So basically what this is a control group where we're saying, hey, we're going to add in something. We know that there should be definite results. And if there is not definite results, there's something going with the system that's not working. Whether it's our testing methods or our data collecting methods aren't working right, there's something going wrong here. This checks to make sure that your experiment is running correctly. Because if we don't get those results, something's going wrong. Negative control group experiment where no response to the variable occurs, opposite of positive. This checks for false positives. This checks the system again if your data collection is going correctly, and checks the just to make sure your data management is correct. So these are two different types of controller groups. I used to go into a lot more depth with these, but I do like just to mention them here. There's a really good video on this online that talks about coffee and blood pressure. And basically, what this video does is it talks about whether coffee affects blood pressure. And you can see they have all these different groups, like our subjects who drank coffee, decaf coffee, drank water, and drank nothing. Then they gave their participants a drug to lower blood pressure and to raise blood pressure. And they wanted to make sure that they are getting the right data, because maybe there is something going on there with the coffee and blood pressure, but their system isn't recording the data correctly. So they're adding in these positive and negative control groups to make sure that their system or their experiment is running correctly. All right, independent versus dependent variable. You should know what these are. Independent variable is the part of the experiment that you change. This is one variable. The dependent variable depends on the independent variable, the part of the experiment that changes as a result of manipulation. And this is where the scientists gather their data from. Usually, we put the independent variable down here because this is the one that we change, and then the dependent variable is up here, but not always, but usually. All right, let's talk about a theory and a law. We've got to know the difference between a theory and a law. Theories describe how and why something happens, and they are able to model and they are able to predict things. The theory of gravity, it describes how the mass, or how does mass have gravity. Law describes what happens. This does not explain how. It explains nature under certain circumstances. Law of gravity, masses have an attractive force. Doesn't describe how they have an attractive force, it just says, hey, they have an attractive force. Theories and laws are totally different. They are not describing the same thing. And the big thing that I like to make sure students know is theories do not become laws with more evidence. There's a big misunderstanding out there that people think like, hey, if a theory gains more evidence, it'll become a law. Will never happen, because they are just two separate ideologies and understandings in science. So do not think that theories are like guesses, because those are hypotheses. Theories are like these understandings and these just explanations in science and biology that have gathered so much evidence and that have been proved, or not, again, I don't like to say proven, but have been supported. That's the word I'm going for. Supported time and time and time again. I like this meme because, or this cartoon, because it kind of shows what science is like. There's an onion in space orbiting sun. Prove me wrong. You can't prove a negative. That's true. You cannot prove a negative. It's just not how science works. It says you can't find the onion first, then work backwards. Well, you've gone and made proving stuff hard. Yeah, almost like it's science. Yeah, again, you don't prove things in science, but you support them with evidence, and it's a tough field, but it's a rewarding field. All right, science uses the metric or the SI system. It has a base 10 system. I'm not going to go over much more here. I'm just reminding you that there is a scientific measurement system here. We use meter for length, kilogram for mass, and Kelvin for temperature, but not always. We actually use we use Celsius in here, and even Fahrenheit. It's not accurate, but that's science. Yeah. All right, so this is going to be the end of our chapter. It's only 2 sections, so we would have won over this in 2 days. But yeah, this is the end of the chapter.